It's beginning to look a lot like Christmas. The days are long, children play outdoors in shorts, the beaches are filled with those unwinding in sand and surf. Or if you're in the Northern Hemisphere, it might also be nice. Whatever your location, in all likelihood, you are also feeling the onslaught of the Christmas spirit. Perhaps you roll your eyes at November carols, or perhaps your tree is already up. You might have a diary full of final meetings, final tasks, Christmas lunches, Christmas dinners, Christmas parties, days designated for shopping, cooking, wrapping, family events, or perhaps your diary is way open, and that makes the never-ending barrage of adverts centering on happy families and laughing friends all the more painful. Whatever your personal situation, the church is entering the season of Advent, my favorite liturgical season, which is an affection thankfully shared by my guest. Advent is a time of waiting and hastening, as the author of 2 Peter puts it. A season of looking to the coming of Christ in humility and fragility at Bethlehem, and looking to his coming again in glory at the end of the age. Both events, if they can be seen as distinct events, place demands on our lives and our ethical engagement with the world. Now, this season is not just Christmas, and when it is, it has a lot to say about Christmas's commercialization and sanitization. But what is Advent all about? And what does it have to say about Christmas? Well, that's why I'm talking to my guest. My name is Leah Miller, almost botched it. This is the Love, Rinse, Repeat podcast, and my guest today is the Reverend Lauren R.E. Larkin. Well, Lauren, welcome to Love, Rinse, Repeat.
Thanks for having me.
So people might be aware that I was recently on your podcast, Sancta Colloquia, and talking the Book of Numbers, and now you're here to talk Advent. So we're doing a little tit for tat, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a fun one. It's a fun tit for tat.
Yeah. I think we've chosen very wildly different topics, but that'll be exciting too.
Absolutely.
So we're getting into Advent, but you know, it's hard to talk Advent without Christmas, though we might want to talk about that collapsing of one into the other. But let's just talk a bit of Christmas first, okay. Since the trees are starting to go up all around. Christmas merch is in the shops. Christmas carols are playing. We're in the season. It has begun. It's getting hot, so you know it's an Australian Christmas.
I'm in Louisiana, so it's still hot.
Okay, there you go. So got that in common. So I want a few, I guess, kind of maybe some quick fire Christmas movies.
Okay.
Favorite Christmas song?
Favorite Silent Night. Silent Night.
Okay. Yep. Great.
Wait. Ooh. Oh, this is my indecision showing through. O come Emmanuel.
Yeah, that's good. That's that's probably my favorite. Might be Oh Holy Night.
Yeah.
But O Come Emmanuel is definitely my favorite. And especially if I was to jump into the a category of favorite Advent songs, then I'm getting Come Emmanuel right there.
Yeah, and I don't really know if I have a distinction between the two necessarily.
Yeah. That's fair.
So,
all right,
yeah.
We can come back to that. So then, okay. Favorite Christmas movie?
Oh, well, confession is that I had to Google Christmas movies because I don't really watch the TV, and I had to remind myself about what Christmas movies that I like. And you know, really, I can't think that anything replaces The Grinch in my heart. Mm-hmm. Which is funny because, you know, The Grinch and Small Hearts. But it's definitely one of my favorites. And then the classic Charlie Brown Christmas, not necessarily a movie, but it is 30 minutes long. And we do show that to the kids and stuff. But definitely that's the classic kind of Christmassy type thing. But my favorite like more religious-based movie around for the season is The Nativity. I think it's from 2006, and it has a really powerful scene in it that I often use when I'm talking about the birth of Christ and how radical this event really is. So There you go. There's a few.
Yeah, that's good. All right, another Christmas question. What's the biggest or the most common mistake you've seen in Christmas sermons? Christmas Day sermons. What are the do not do lists?
Oh, well, how do I say this and maintain that I am actually a priest in the Episcopal Church? Okay, I don't really have a strong recollection of going to a lot of Christmas Day services because we had kids and I was just recently ordained to the priesthood. So it's only now that I actually kind of have to be there. I've always gone to decently, very well-based homiletic churches, in the sense that they tend to preach from scripture. Not that that's like the single marker, but usually if you're preaching from the text and you're engaging with the text, and you're letting the text sort of dictate how it is that you're going about your message, your Christmas message, I think that you're going to hit it. You're going to get that spot pretty well. The Christmas Eve would probably be a more notable one. I think that's the one that we did with the kids. And then we would just, Christmas morning with 3 kids is not necessarily, let's everyone go to church. So that would be, it just depends. I've been really fortunate. The seminary that I went to where my husband and I met and where I had all my kids, well, not at seminary. I mean, that would be real life experience. Pastoral care, 400, the laboring woman. But we did homiletics, and preaching was a very, very emphasized subject at the school, and very fortunate to have very good priests around. And the church, I was always sort of this kind of spearhead about where we went to church. And that's picky. The word event, the preaching event is very important for me, always has been. So we sort of always had really good preachers all throughout Pittsburgh. And then Colorado was a little bit touch and go. But then now I'm ordained priest. So now I get to preach sometimes. And the church I go to does a pretty decent job as well. So I don't really have anything like, yikes, that was really bad.
That's good. That's a good thing.
I did have, now come back to me around Easter.
Okay.
And I have some bad Easter sermons. But in general, Christmas seems to be a low ball. Like I feel like almost everyone gets it.
That's a good point. Yeah. Well, maybe let's get to know a little about you, Reverend Lauren Larkin. Now, some might have listened to your other podcast and know a bit about you, but plenty won't. So you mentioned you're a priest in the Episcopal Church, and you've got 3 kids. But let's just hear a bit about you, what you're doing, where you're ministering, and some things that stir passion in you.
Well, I spend most of my time in the classroom. I teach high school theology and religion, currently teaching world religions to the 11th and 12th graders. So I've got a motley crew. They're really, really fascinating because they are desperate to be heard, but they are also simultaneously still controlled by their parents at home or whatever sort of influences are going on societally, either at the school, which is a private school. So you already have messages of privilege and elite kind of coursing through. And then you have the home life, which, if you're sending your kid to a private Christian school, you usually have an elite existence, a privileged existence. And so there's this, you're going to go in the direction that your parents have told you that they want you to go in. And usually that is following in line with making a living, specifically maybe taking up the reins of the company that your parents have established. And so we have a lot of kids like that. And they aren't often heard. And so even in a class, I might be talking about Buddhism, or maybe I'm talking about Christianity or whatever it is for this semester. These students really want to be heard. And so I get the fortunate experience to create for them a safe space where they can communicate what they're thinking, even if it's totally crazy. I tell them, I said, my classroom's Vegas. See what happens in Vegas stays in Vegas, as long as I don't have to report it. But so I get to listen to them, kind of try on the new footwear of being theologians and philosophers. philosophers, which they already are. If they're already making conclusions about the world, ideas about God, about humanity, then they're already practicing those things. And they just need someone to hear them and not say something like, oh, hey, that's wrong. That's not what we believe. I get to say more. Tell me more about that. Expound on that. Let me push your logic to its furthest conclusion and see how that goes. So that's really kind of fun to do. This year, I've been at this job. This is my second year. This year, they gave me the 8th graders, which I laugh about because I'm so not a middle school teacher.
Yeah.
There's only 2 middle schoolers in this world that understand like a lick of what I say. And those are my 2 own sons, but they're used to my vocabulary and they know that I'm a little bit crazy. So, but anyway, so now I have the 8th graders, the babies of the high school, and I get to control their God talk now. Now I have total control from 8th to 12th. So I'm not sure if that was smart, but I'm certainly going to make use of it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so teaching theology to about 70 students this semester, and then I'll probably get closer to about 100 next semester. So
Wow.
Yeah.
And you're a doctoral student as well on top of all this.
I am brand new at University of Aberdeen.
Very nice. Oh, congratulations on that.
Thank you.
And good luck balancing it all.
Thanks.
But wait,
I heard that. I heard your tone. You're crazy. That's what you were thinking.
No. Very, 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 no. All the best. So
well, I do tell people that I read theology for fun. So really all I'm doing is taking that fun reading and turning it into other fun reading, which is actually going to end up in a degree. Yeah, so I'm not adding too much.
That's smart. Yeah, exactly. It was someone who teaches at the college where I'm doing my formation. She kind of talks about how she ended up getting her master's was, well, I knew I wanted to kind of keep reading theology once I started being a minister. I didn't want to like completely drop out. So, but I'm like, I don't know if I'll be disciplined enough to just do it like locked in on my own. So if I just do a subject a semester, that'll give me guided reading and a chance to reflect on it. And then lo and behold, here I am now and teaching in the college. So yeah, who knows what happens. But you're right. When you can utilize what you do for fun, it's not a bad idea. So we're here to talk about Advent. Yes. Tis the season, almost. And this was when we were kind of hashing out some ideas of what we want to talk about. This was one I suggested just because of the calendar, and you jumped on it with enthusiasm.
I did.
For Advent coming through. So what drew you to wanting to talk about Advent? What's Advent for you? Why are you excited about it?
Advent is a really unique period of the liturgical calendar. I like it as a woman. It is between God and Mary. And I marvel at how that whole idea of not just leading up to, this like suspense of the birth of Christ, but the actual idea really focusing in on Mary. And I'm not Catholic, so I don't make Mary into someone that I pray to. But I really, as a woman, here's the event of God that is coming through her. And so I like to think about how, like Jesus gestates in Mary, like her heartbeat, her voice, everything. Like he would have, the Christ Jesus would have, come into the world knowing her voice best, her heartbeat, her smell, her comfort. Also, too, when he breaks into that event, it's also one of the most unclean. Birth had prescribed laws around it, that you were unclean for, 60 days, I think it is, if you had a girl, and 30 days if you had a boy, and you were considered unclean. And yet here is the Christ in the lap of the unclean woman. Automatically, without speaking a word or doing anything, causing those laws to kind of collapse down on themselves, sort of foreshadowing the woman with perpetual bleeding who's going to reach out and try and touch him in the midst of the crowd. And so you have this really intimate engagement between God and her. And so I get this moment. I feel this moment. I relate to this moment. I understand it. Her, be preparing to bring a child into the world first time. A lot of it is, it's uniquely one of the events that seems the most I don't want to say feminine, because I never want to necessarily say that birth is feminine, even though the act of birth is in there to some extent, but you can be feminine without having the act of birth, if that makes sense. Trying to be careful of my language. But that there's this, that here in this moment, this is God contending with the world through her, through this act. And I feel that every time one of us does enter into the act of labor and delivery, not that you can you're not, not that you can't do this in other ways, but the way that I've envisioned my own process of going through labor and delivery as a woman is where contending with death is what she's doing in that moment. And it's remarkable. Like, she will hand over herself and say, my life for this one. I always get emotional about it, but like that there's this, like she would rather die than not bring this child into the world. And I feel like that is so reminiscent of, or very, very, I'm losing my language because my brain's just like firing all these thoughts right now, but it's just the most earthy, tangible moment of the encounter with God. And it's just filled with the blood and water of new life. The same thing is going to be reproduced on the cross with Christ. I always, Christmas to Easter, it's the birth event is happening on the cross. And you have this new life that comes out of that event. And I think that's always why the women stick around, because they've done the labor and delivery thing. And so watching Christ go through what he goes through in the event of the cross is for them, oh, I know this is happening here. And I understand that, like, sociologically, they didn't have to run because they had nothing to lose. But at the cross event, you have this reproduction of what happens, what Mary does to bring Christ into the world. You have Christ doing to bring new life into the world. And so they're wonderfully maternal events. And so you have, I think that's really where I want to go, is that you have the maternity of God happening here. And so I see it and I relate to it and I love it. And I love that it's the Son of God sitting in the lap of the unclean woman. And I just think that from there on out, like, everything has to be reconfigured. Everything has to be reconfigured because of that event. And so it's something new, something breaking into the current order of existence. What we've declared unclean, God has declared clean and good and beautiful, and chose to do so through his own entrance into that event, that inbreaking, that encounter with humanity through that act of labor and delivery. Advent for me just is, I'd rather hear Advent sermons all day long than necessarily resurrection sermons. It's just such an earthy human thing to do, be born,
Yeah, no, it's the great moment of that solidarity of Christ with the human experience, and coming in not only that humility, but that fragility. Because as you say, it is this moment of when, especially in that time, but even still today, both parties could die. One party could die, I remember when my wife was, we have a little 18-month-old, and when she was giving birth, I don't know where it kind of came into my head, but I had this like real fear that she was going to die, like during the process when we're in the room. And she wasn't close to that, but you don't know. All you see is people coming and going and checking machines and all that. And something like, I remember being like so just relieved at the end. And yeah, it is this moment where exactly these things, like a new life, but also like surrounding that, this risk, this fragility, this, just wildness. So yeah, it is a really interesting moment. That is the moment that this incarnation, this story, this great cosmic drama of redemption is going to begin.
And this infant born is now 100% dependent on her. Joseph can come and go. I mean, sorry.
No, very true, very true.
I did on-demand feeding with my babies, and there was, about the first year, my husband was like, I'm starting just now to kind of feel like I'm important to this child. But there is that infant wants her. Jesus wanted her and will suckle at her breast, and she will do everything in her power to keep this child alive. And he, in that moment, is 100% dependent on that maternal drive. I mean, that is vulnerability. And I can't say that word without slaughtering it, but it is completely vulnerable. God in her hands, the helplessness that Joseph feels, which is one of the most humbling, I think, one of the most humbling events I think men go through with the being so present. Nowadays, being so present with labor and delivery, realizing how little you're doing. I always argue that it's his responsibility to like keep the space so that she can enter into this great battle with death. And so it's scary because you have to let your wife go into it. I don't know if you guys did any natural labor training. But we did. And there is a moment where you get trained very extensively. There's a very good program that we do here in the States called Bradley Method. And it actually prepares you for the active transition, which is where you go from the active labor into I'm about to push, but it's about 30 to 45 minutes. And the best way for the woman to get through it, if she's doing it natural without any drugs or any interventions whatsoever, is to act dead. She has to go into a whole other realm of existence. Now, I wasn't fortunate enough to actually go through with it. My midwife called a C-section before I got there. But when we had lost a pregnancy, I was about 10 weeks along, and my body went from no contractions to what was considered transition to contractions. They peak 3 times. There's very little gap, and you just want to die. It is so painful. And you spend 45 minutes in this time, your body transitioning itself, getting ready to bring over. And the only thing you can do is play dead. The only thing you can do is lie there totally still. And it's neat to kind of actually, like, literally every woman gets close to that moment of I'm going to die. I have to face this now. And then the body actually has to act dead for this 45, 30 minutes where the body gets ready to hand itself over to the active pushing. So talk about coming back to life. So it's just really neat. And I don't think we spend enough time actually looking at Mary doing this in a cave. Okay. There's some discussion, about whether or not Joseph was actually there because he may have gone off to go find the help. So potentially alone, and going through the whole entire event. And she is alone. And it's just like going to death. You're born alone, you die alone, and you labor alone. And so it's just, I think the church would do better to play up some of these things, looking more at the maternity, because what's going to happen is Christ is going to go at it alone. That whole aloneness is something that's going to replay itself out on the hardwood of the cross in the event of Christ's death and hallelujah resurrection. But so there's that. Anyway, I could wax uneloquently on all of this stuff.
Very
for
eloquently.
Hours.
Very eloquently. I've just been thinking the last however long this has been, this excellent content. I'm like, this is like what we've robbed Christians by not having women preachers for so long, and still in so many parts of the church, to how we've lost this kind of reflection and this way of coming at this moment that is, it's just people. I mean, probably everyone's listening to this already knows that. So send it to your family and friends and the churches you left. So we've got the idea of Jesus, coming in this humble, earthy, vulnerable, human way. But Advent also looks beyond to the coming again in glory. Advent is the season that looks beyond history. And sees our hope in the future of God. How does that inform your thinking? How do you hold that with all that we've talked about so far? How does that shape your Advent life?
My Advent life, waiting again. That unknowability of God's oncoming futurity, that tension being brought into the story of Israel waiting. So Advent is us being ushered into, if done rightly, I think that all of Advent should be ushering us into that story, really getting that palpable waiting and expectation, waiting for the child to be born, waiting for the Messiah to come, that we should really feel that storyline. And when it comes to the future, the kind of anticipation of, I think that we can learn from the historical event of Christ's birth and that waiting period, that patience, that long suffering, that striving. And I think what happens though is where I'm hesitant to necessarily just immediately go Advent, future coming of Christ, is that a lot of Christians do that in the purpose of forgetting the now. I'm very focused on the now. I want the now to mean something. So that I would rather err on, just as it was unexpected that the Christ would be born in this way and would operate the way that he operated, so too I want to have that same mystery applied to the future. So yes, that we wait, but we aren't inactive while we wait. And so I think that in general, I don't, while the two can be linked liturgically, theologically, and biblically, however you want to kind of tease that out, I think my hesitation is I want to not just jump to, I want to go through that. We have to walk through, liturgically speaking, we walk through the life of Christ. So too, we walk through our lives, not just with an eye to the future, waiting for the second coming. Everything's going to be great, and this whole entire ship can go down in flames, and I'm not really going to give a damn. But more that like every step on this journey has an impact and an imprint, and that we take those steps seriously, realizing that like many generations that passed in the waiting for the Messiah, so too will our generation probably pass. That we don't know when or where or how. God is non-objectifiable, and we can't. Same thing too of God's future, in the sense of his future activity or God's future activity towards us. So it's interesting. I guess I want to take the Advent story and say this is our story. We wait too, but we're active while we wait.
I think that's where like the 2 Peter kind of waiting and hastening is such a good text, because it is this kind of an active waiting, or I think Michael Gorman has the phrase of it, anticipatory participation. So there's because I think there's two, because you watch those shows like they're a very American kind of thing, that like the Doomsday Preppers, I think it's like the kind of the show, which is basically those people who are like, end of the world's coming, so they're building homes under the earth and
like
stockpiling all their thing. And that's like one way that people kind of like, oh, let's just focus on the end and just preserve, like bunker down, preserve kind of thing. Or there's the way of, look, the end is coming, maybe soon, maybe we don't know when, but there is an end, and the end informs the present in such a way that you intensify your ethical engagement with the world.
Yes.
I think it's like Jesus is kind of, you could say, if Jesus kind of felt like there was an imminent return, it's much easier than to say like, cut off your hand if you like want to steal, or like definitely don't even hate rather than murder, because like really be redefined. But I think you're right. It's so the trick is, it's not just easier to go straight to that waiting, because so many people will associate it with ethical abandonment, passivity, whatever. Whereas Martin Luther King Jr. also saw like I've seen the coming of the glory, and that's what inspired him to act, kind of thing, because he knew that his action was all, whatever little good he could do would come to a greater good in the coming of God. But you're right, it's tricky because we're playing against a certain history and certain movement and present.
Yeah. What's interesting is that, so I became a Christian. I was raised Catholic. I don't want to make that distinction. Catholics are Christians, but I wasn't raised like into faith in the sense that I was dropped off at church to go to catechism, and my parents were like, "Bye, good luck, like flowers." And so I don't want to necessarily. I didn't have like a foundation of faith, and I came into the event of faith, maybe I should say, later as an adult. And for me, when the idea of resurrection, or even future hope of, I'm kind of jumping a little bit in terms of the second coming of Christ, resurrection, bodily resurrection, looking at the future hope that Christians often have in Christ. And for me, when that concept first presented itself, I was sort of like, oh, okay, well, that makes all my suffering in life kind of makes sense. Like I can have this hope. But for me, it never indicated, oh, now I can just give up and do whatever and just, it made me, I wanted to risk more. I wanted to engage more. I wanted to really fight for stuff, because now I really wasn't necessarily hindered by the fear of death. Like I had more fear of death definitely leading into before becoming a Christian, in chaos. And that's what I lived in, for sure. And the encounter with God in the event of faith was the opposite of chaos. It was consistency, but not in a predictability kind of way. It was just that kind of solid ground foundation, I would almost say. But anyway, that idea of, it was sort of new to me to hear that, like, wait, your hope and resurrection is going to make you kind of, have ethical abandonment. Like I didn't necessarily connect the dots when I encountered him, when I encountered that line of thinking. But it is, when I look around, I see it left and right. And I understand the need to correct it. So also too, we don't know. I talk with my students, and they want to know, like, is resurrection real, Reverend Larkin? And I say, I don't know, I haven't died yet. So I'm old, but not that old. Yeah. Watch your words. Yeah. I'm grading you. Yeah. But that hope that we, I always exhort holding on loosely. And so we do. The future is coming. What it is, I don't know. And I just plan to be as engaged as I can be while I'm still able to walk on 2 feet. And if I have to push a walker, I will walk with a walker. If it's in a wheelchair, I'll be on that wheelchair. Until cold death takes me from this land, I'll fight as long as and as hard as I can. I joke with my students that the Grim Reaper, when he comes, better be big, because I'm not going down without a fight. So anyway, I mean, it's just an interesting thing. I have a way more stronger present tense value for Advent than I do necessarily the future, in the sense that I kind of allow the future to be that thing that kind of not necessarily threatens me, but allows the mystery to kind of confront me and remind me that I'm human and that I'm here. And it's coming. So.
And I think that, like, that present tense sense of Advent, of the coming of Christ, and thus our living the journey of Christ, is, a good way of approaching Advent in times such as these.
Yes.
With the growing fear and distrust, with the going, desire to kind of ensure sort of stability through might, right. and good masculine power. I think I'd do that somewhere through the interview. But like that's such a, and also where we've been, this year with the, both Australia and in America, the separation of refugees from children, from their children and their families. And here you have, the Holy Family being formed. So Advent in the present has plenty for times such as these, even without turning to the second horizon.
I do have to confess that there were a number of mornings where I woke up and I said, we're still here. Yeah, it's a scary set of times, and just so many dilemmas, and it's not good. It's not good, but it could force those who have been lukewarm.
Yes.
Over.
Yeah.
We need less silence. We need less lukewarmness. We need more passion and zeal.
Yeah. Yes, 100%.
Not so much definitely for the side of the oppressed. Let me just qualify.
Everyone else can be apathetic.
Actually, why don't you tone it down? Get some saltpeter in your water or something over there. We'll go ahead over here and just be active and zealous.
That's exactly. So I've got a little game to play.
Ooh,
to some extent. I was trying to remember the name of it, whether it's like Dear Someone. What's that thing where people write letters in to the person in the magazine?
Dear John.
Yeah.
Dear Johns are bad. Dear Johns are like,
Dear John's
hey,
love
it's
letters
not
or
you.
something.
It's me.
Yeah,
Dear Abby.
Yeah, Dear Abby, that could be it.
Okay.
Well, anyway, Dear Lauren.
Yes.
So basically, we have the Advent candles. We have, representing peace, hope, joy, and light. I think I got them right. And we're going into this Advent season, this Christmas season. And I've got some case studies of people who want to know how they can embody and live out these Advent principles, I guess. And I feel you and I'll happily jump in. We can try to think about how we live in this Advent season as best we can. So basically, the first person is Stephen. Stephen writes to us that, every day I wake up, as you say, and read these stories in the newspaper, stories of, I turn on, I get Twitter because who's reading a newspaper? Open up Twitter and I see, the president's tweeting and there's terrible laws being announced and there's children being ripped away and there was a tsunami last night. And I'm going to have to go to church and they're going to light this hope candle in front of us on this first week of Advent. I mean, how in the world am I meant to grasp onto any kind of sense of robust hope when all I'm getting is 24-hour news cycles and anytime I open my phone is seemingly a cavalcade of bad news? How do I grasp hope in this season of Advent when that candle is lit?
I don't know. I'm sort of the opinion that you don't always need to have hope. I think that there are eras where I can be hopeless but not defeated. Is help coming? I don't know. I'm just going to fight like hell. And so I think this one actually kind of like strikes close to my heart because I feel like it's where I am theologically and in my own journey. But is it wrong for a Christian to not have hope? I think that it's okay. I think there are seasons in our lives, and right now it's very hard and it's very dire, and I haven't given up. And so I think that you do without it. It's hard to light that candle. Almost lighting the candle, you do it in a sense of confession that you're looking for it. Maybe we light the hope candle hoping that there be hope. Yeah. Some beautiful light that could descend upon us. That history has shown us that human beings do eventually gather up and fight like hell. Maybe our hope comes from the stories of the past. That we don't, the hope maybe comes from the idea that we don't know what comes in the future, or hope that there is an end. Eventually our suffering ends. Eventually there's that answer that comes. And maybe it's just okay not to be able to locate hope specifically. I am a Christian. I believe in Jesus Christ. I have hope in some of those stories. I don't put all my faith in them. And I am sure that maybe as a priest that might be radical to hear from me. But there is that unknownness. So lighting the candle for me would be a confession of, I lack just this. And I think that's okay. I at least from a Christian perspective, as a Christian priest, I am big on confession and absolution. There's absolution for hopelessness, if you even think that you need it. But that's sort of where I would go with that. On a real honest, yes, we're entering into Advent and it's supposed to be the season of hope and expectation, but sometimes there's not.
No, that's a great response. I think that's a great response. And if you're lighting that candle in the church, maybe you can look around and feel like someone in here might have hope today. Someone here has that. And
you could see it as if we are the corporate body of Christ. And so some of us are more prone to hope than others.
No,
That's
excellent response. We'll print it up in the next newsletter. So The next letter comes from Marsha. Dear Lauren, I'm preparing for my family coming into town. There will undoubtedly be squabbles and fights and bickering and people storming off and all these kind of things. How can I be? We're going to be lighting the peace candle the day before, or just the morning before we have this lunch. How can I be someone of peace in my stressful family?
Drink.
This is turning out so much better than I thought.
Go get her a disease. Go get committed. Go check yourself in at the ER for about 24 hours. Peace. This is an interesting one because I definitely am the black sheep politically, sociologically speaking, of the family. And so keeping the peace for me is just choosing not to die on about 95% of the hills that are presented to me to potentially die on. Pretty much I think now with my family to keep things peaceable or peaceful. It's just, we just don't talk about politics, which is really hard to do because Fox News is always playing. So that's difficult. I also just don't celebrate. We're far enough away from everyone that I don't celebrate with any immediate family. So everything's great because it's my children. And right now they kind of like what all the things that I think about. So, but yeah, that's a hard one because it is so contentious right now. How would you even begin to keep peace apart from just a mutual truce, right? Like we're not going to talk about it. These issues are way too heated. Being honest on that front, I think can go a long way. But again, I certainly don't have any answers, and I don't have any history record to prove that I've somehow been able to navigate those waters with any success. So it's very hard. It's very difficult. And so I don't know. I just almost said play Scrabble, but that in itself, you can get into a number of fights over Scrabble. So anyway, I don't really feel like I have a positive answer for that.
That's okay. That's all right. You might not get a career as a journalist, help guru, but that's fine. That's not what you're after. That's not what you.
No, it's not.
But we'll persist. This one comes from Sarah.
Cool.
Love is all around us at this time of year. Every ad I see mentions the word love. Every Christmas movie works on love. Love is all around us, but it all feels a little soft, maybe a little too sleek. We're about to light the love candle. What is this love, and how do I understand it in a way that feels more real?
Yeah. Well, I've been re-evaluating my conceptions of love. I've spent a long period of my theological career defining it as self-sacrifice. And I do think that, when you step back and you look at the majority of the Christian story, laying down your life is certainly that. But at the same time, I've seen so much abuse come in through that message, lay down your life, especially when it comes to women and people of color, have definitely been sacrificed to that message. And so I want to reevaluate it to some extent, and I don't know how. I'm at the mercy of others right now. What is love? If I define it internally, it's unconditional, but not without consequences and not without sometimes me being just mad enough to walk away. It doesn't mean that I've lost myself. It means that maybe I'm actually loving myself rightly for the first time. It definitely demands an other. I think that even when you're in a contentious engagement with an other, you can actually realize love for yourself in that moment when you defend yourself, you advocate for yourself, and you fight against that. Love is if I take the term, I used to compare agape to eros and say like, oh, eros is taking and agape is giving, and agape is the superior love. But I'm not necessarily sure that the two need to be so divorced. That there is that other people do present to you, give to you. And so that intimacy that can be manifested in love. Again, mother-child is going to be where I go with that. And I bring that up because being a mom is the first time that I ever understood what it meant to love someone else. The love for my husband, love for my parents, love for my friends, everything paled in comparison to when I held my first child and thought, I will do whatever I can to make you succeed in the world. I will give you all of me. And in that process, realizing how much more strength I had, and realizing, Lauren actually has substance. Lauren has to have substance because this child demands that she have substance, and fighting for that. And so there's, we tend to, in the church, talk about, love is this self-giving, that you lose yourself. And I'm really against that. This goes back to the talk that I gave for Jesus 12:24, that we have substantiated selves. We're not just vacuous shells looking to be filled by whatever power of the church would like to see filled with, but we are real people. And I think that part of love has to take in the other, for sure, but then necessitate a substance of self, that loving, it's coming from something. Okay. And we understand agape love to be, it's coming from here outward. Then there has to be something in here that's operating and foundational. There's got to be a substance. And I think we get that substance in Christ by the event of faith and the encounter with God. But that has to be there. So there has to be a delicate balance between loving of other and loving of self. So that's that, how to substantially feel that. I think it starts with us to some extent, and we love from there because we are loved. If we take the encounter with God to defined as love, then we have been loved and loved well.
Yeah.
So.
That's very good. I like it a lot.
Okay.
All right. Last letter.
Oh, right.
Do you want to come up with a fake name this time?
Gertrude.
All right. Gertrude writes, Dear Lauren, you should see my schedule at the moment. Every day I've got meetings, Christmas parties, shopping. It goes on, and I have no time, and I feel stretched. And yet we're about to light the joy candle. How do I feel joyful? How can we be joyful when we are just so busy?
I like being busy. I'm the worst. I'm the worst for this game. Oh, wow. This is just embarrassing.
This is working so well.
I feel like when I'm busy, I mean, I'm bad at rest. I rest for maybe about 12 hours, actual legitimate rest where I'm not doing something. I could be less busy for sure. I don't mind it. I find joy in being in feeling alive. That there is a moment where if you can stop. Okay, so I work out a lot, and I do I
was just saying, and we'll slide a little bragging right in the middle of the.
Yeah. No. It's going somewhere. Actually, I promise. I'm not just being like, I'm so awesome. Because I actually don't think that. I mean, even though that's the running joke in my house that I think I'm awesome, but I swear, I promise, I'm humble. But anyway, there's a moment when I get really, really, really exhausted, and I'm doing burpees, let's say, and there's this. I've been trying to hone in on the moment where in the middle of a competition burpee, you kind of lift your hands up and you're just on the mat flat. And I try to pinpoint the moment where my whole body rests for a second. And I almost in that moment feel so much energy from having been able to intellectually engage in that split second that like I can pop back up and finish up the exercise. But then in every exercise, even running, there's this moment where nothing's hitting the ground and you're flying. And so like kind of honing in on those moments has been a way of me to experience being alive. I have joy. I'm not always happy, but I always have joy. And I think a lot of that comes from the reality that if you look at my past, if you look at the darkness and the stories that I have in my history, I shouldn't be here. I very much should be dead. And I know that. And so I think for me, I have joy just from like, okay, I'm here. I've got one more day. I've got another day. And so that's really how it's been for a lot of me. I don't get depressed I can be doubtful. I can be dark for sure. And I can exist there. But there's part of me that really thinks that like every day I get to like touch my child's hand or to touch leaves of a tree or smell a flower that I get is beautiful, that it's not a guarantee. We don't have them. So like waking up and just being grateful that I have one more day. I've got one more day to make an impact, change a student's life, enjoy the earth that I've been given, to care for and to take care of it and to help its own prosperity, then that's what I'm going to do. And so I tend to be hardwired that way. And I know that that's not for everyone. But when you realize that there are certain events in your past that should have taken your life and they didn't, you feel pretty lucky to be here and to fight like hell. And then you keep fighting like hell. And if nothing in my past has taken me down just yet, nothing's going to immediately, unless I'll definitely be fighting against it. But so that's sort of where the joy comes in, is just the fragility of life, and we have it, and it should be celebrated as much as we can celebrate it. So that's where joy comes for me. And the Christ event, the birth of Christ, is a foundation for me in that moment of joy, and encountering God in that moment is a powerful event for me. So, but that's a whole other story.
That was excellent. Thank you so much. Those are some tough questions I threw at you, and you nailed them. And I appreciate your responses and your openness and vulnerability in that. So thank you, Lauren. This was great.
It was fun.
I really appreciate it. I loved being on your podcast and had a great time, and it's been awesome to have you here. Because I mean, you were great when we did Jesus 1224, but now this is not behind a paywall. But you can still get the ticket. If you liked what you heard, you can contact me and I can get you the videos from Jesus 1224. There you go. There's my plug. But Lauren, I guess what do you want to plug? How can people connect with you? Stay in touch with what you're doing.
I do love me some Twitter, and it's Lauren R.E. Larkin. That's the handle there. And I do have a blog, laurenrelarkin.com. That's also where you can access links to Sancta Colloquia. And that is, I think, pretty much it. Everything else is on the DL. I'm not really active on Facebook, so that's pointless. Instagram, I'm sporadic with, so Twitter is usually the best spot, and all that jazz.
And Lauren's blog is great. She has some of my favorite sermons up there. I really love your sermons. So we should check that out. And Sancta Colloquia has 4 episodes now. I'm on the 4th, most recent one. So if you want to check it out with some level of familiarity, start with that one. But they're all great. And I'm excited for more. Dropping monthly, right?
We're skipping November because I had the AAR thing, and then next month is I'm in the process of planning for December, so it should be good.
Excellent. So stay tuned for that. Subscribe so it just shows up in your podcast feed when you need it.
Yes, exactly.
Well, Reverend Lauren R.E. Larkin, thank you for joining us and talking about Advent. I'm sure anyone who is listening is already going to preach a better sermon or hear the sermon better for this, and we'll all hopefully live full and in meaningful Advent lives. So thank you for joining us today.
Well, thank you for having me. It's been quite an honor.